Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome once again. Now we are just moving through these measures, and I know you're amazed at how fast it's going. And we will continue to pick up the pace. So, today we are very pleased to continue with our study of measure 3. Today we're going to learn how to make the Masdar and all the participles. Okay, and trust me, it's going to be easy. As I always say, if you've learned the patterns we've done previously, this will be a breeze. If you haven't, it will be more like a hurricane, but that's all right. So, here's our goal today. We want to recognize and correctly form active participle, passive participle, and the Masdar, and we're also going to do the place noun. We're going to do everything for measure 3. It may sound like a lot, but it's actually not, and hopefully you will see that. As always, we want to review a little bit. So far, we've been through 3 measures, and this is what they look like. First, just our basic 3-letter root was measure 1. Then we put a shedda over the middle letter. That gave us measure 2. And in our last lesson, we learned how to form measure 3, and that was by putting an aleph in between the first 2 root letters. And I certainly hope this is becoming very repetitious and redundant to you. That's good. That means you've got it down and you know it. Okay, there are also meanings associated with these 3 measures. The first, measure 1, is just the basic meaning of any root. Measure 2 was the causative, to cause something to be whatever measure 1 was. And as we saw last time, measure 3 was basically the reciprocal. Do unto others as they are doing unto you. That may not actually be the golden rule, but in terms of measure 3, it certainly is. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm sure you're saying, I know this. That's good. Okay, and let's just review what these terms were. Again, hopefully this is tediously old hat to you. That's good. We want to be tedious. Okay, so the active participle, this was the doer. Remember, like writer, speaker, singer, dancer, and so forth. The doer of the action. Passive participle was done, written, spoken, known, so forth. Okay, now we want to focus here on measure 2 specifically, the ones we did in the previous unit, because that will be the map, basically the pattern, not only for measure 3, but for every measure here on out. You know, measure 1 kind of does its own thing, but everyone else sort of follows the rules. So, if you remember, this is what we ended up with for measure 2. Now, we are just going to borrow this same pattern. Exactly, it's in fact the exact same pattern. So, as you get used to hearing by now, if you learn these patterns for measure 2, then you really have nothing new to learn for measure 3, but stay with us. Okay, so remember this was, and we're going to use the present tense. Remember the present tense verb was the basis for all of these. So this was our measure 2, right? This is our measure 2 pattern. So remember the verb was yufa'il. So we put a U, always an U sound, and remember the vowel pattern was always a-il, you-fa-il, you-katib, you-sharik, you-qaddam, and so forth. Okay? Now, if you remember, for the active participle, all we did was chop off the first, the conjugation letter, basically, and put a mu in there. Right? So, Yufa'il became mufa'il. Mufa'il was the doer. Okay, that was pretty simple. Then the passive participle, all we did was switch this kasra to a fatha, which is not written and is somewhat hard to hear. So mufa'il, mufa'il, between an I and an a sound. So these are going to look very similar. This was the passive participle, the done. And for bonus, the place noun was exactly the same as the passive participle. Now, seeing as these are generally all going to be written the same way, it's context that tells you which one that it is. Okay, now, hopefully take a good look at these patterns, because all we're going to do is plug measure 3 in where we have measure 2. So we start with our measure 3 verb. Now notice how much it looks like the 2. The only difference is instead of having a shedda on the middle radical, it has an aleph in between. Otherwise it's the same, right? Yufa'il, yufa'il. Same u, same I, same pattern. Well, this is going to be great because the same thing is going to hold. We're going to change this u to a mu, mufa'il. This is the active participle. This is the doer of whatever this is. This exact same pattern, except switch this shedda out for an aleph here, mufa'al. And just like with measure 2, we can throw in the place noun for good measure. It's the exact same as the passive participle. So again, the difference between these 3 here is going to be in large measure by the context. Now, you see how measure 3 was just like plugging into this pattern here from measure 2. Well, get used to it. Guess what we're going to be doing for measures 4, 5, 6, 7, and all the way through. So this is why I say, if you didn't get this pattern down the first time, hey, this is a video, pause it and make sure you learn it, because this is going to hold for everything here on out, which means the next couple lessons are going to be really easy for you. Okay, so as always, you want to see some examples of this. Okay, so here we have a very good measure 3 verb, yusharik. Yusharik means to participate. Now this is a great example of a reciprocal. Now there is actually a measure 1, sharaka, to participate in something, but it's talking about one person, right, joining, let's say. But here, yusharik, to participate, means other people are doing what you're doing. So this is a great example of a reciprocal. Yusharik is to participate, and you can see clearly the root, shin, ra, kaf, yusharik. Now what I want to know is, what is a participant? Okay, take a moment. Right, you've probably already gotten it, but let's see how we get that. Okay, so participant is what? It's the doer, so that means it's an active participle. What did we do to get our active participle? Well, we took the verb and we just changed the first, we took the conjugation letter and made it a mu. So if yusharik is to participate, hopefully you should see that a musharik is a participant. And you could go in the other direction. So pause for a moment here. Hopefully this should be like really obvious to you and you say, yeah, I get it. If not, you want to go back and review, because everything else is just going to pile up on top. Now, usually we have more than one musharik. Not much fun with one musharik. So we want participants. Well, here we just use the human plural form that you learned way back at the beginning. Okay, so musharakun, it's like the same pattern as misriyun, amrikiyun, and so forth. Musharakun, and it can be musharakin. They mean the same thing, depending on the function in the sentence. So, musharakun, this is participants. Alright, now we know you love to go backwards. Right, it's like skating backwards to show off. Okay, so, here, mushahidun. Mushahidun, I'm going to tell you this means spectators, or watchers, or viewers, whatever, the people in the audience. Now, you know what we want. Oh, you know. We want the verb. We want to go backwards and get the verb. Okay, so we want the verb. How do we get the verb here? Well, I'm sure you know. We just eliminate the extras to get down to the stem. We know that un is a plural. Mu is making this the active participle. And so we get our stem, shahid, and we know yushahid to view, ushahid, tushahid, nushahid, yushahidun, and so forth. Now, you may be saying, well, these patterns look a lot alike. How can we tell which is which? Well, it is the context, of course. Look at the following sentence. This has a measure 3 that you will recognize. Safara al-musafir illa sharq al-awsat. Okay, well, we want to know what this word means. Now you notice, right, this pattern has no vowels on it, so it could be any of those patterns we showed you earlier. Well, let's think about this. Safara. Safara is what? Right, that's the verb, traveled. Illa, to, Sharq al-Awsat, the Middle East. So this is what? Is this going to be active participle, passive participle? What is it? Right, obviously this is the subject. Who traveled? The traveler, a musafir. Okay, so we can figure out by context. Okay. Now, having done the participles, and we've talked mostly about active participle, to be honest, in this measure, the other two, the passive participle and the place noun, are not nearly as common. They do exist, but they're not nearly as common as the active that you're going to see. Now, I want to talk about the Masdar. This is another example. Well, let's look at this. First of all, just to review, what is a Masdar? Of course, it's the verbal noun. It is a noun, and it means the doing of something, as in, swimming is great exercise. He hates studying. Right? These two words in red are verbal nouns, and how do we know they're nouns? Because you could replace them with any other nouns. He hates studying. He hates broccoli. He hates tests, whatever. Okay, so these are nouns. Now, if you remember, and you should definitely, we said measure 2 had a very distinct form, the tafa'il form. Well, measure 3 has a distinct Masdar form, and so you have to remember this particular form that we're going to show you. Now, the good news is all the other measures from 4 on up are going to follow a very easy pattern, and so it's not going to be an issue. But let us look at this. So the measure 3 Masdar form looks like this. Now, this part looks very similar to what you've seen before. In fact, the beginning of it, the mufa'al, I mean, this is exactly the same as the passive participle that we had earlier. Right? It looks exactly like that, and it has a tamabuta at the end. Mufa'ala. Okay, now, it's easy enough to recognize. It's not a difficult pattern, but it gets confusing because it looks so much like all the others. So if you come across something like this, which is the way you would see it, with no vowels on it, is this a Masdar or is this a female active participle? Is this a female doer or the Masdar? Well, it could be either one. So again, what's going to tell? Yes, that's correct, the context. So, let's take an example. Here is, again, a measure 3 verb that we've seen before. Yushahid. Yushahid is to watch. We just derived that one. Yushahid is to watch. Now, we want the verbal noun for watching something. Well, take a moment. Think about the pattern. Here's the pattern. There's your verb. Put them together, and what have you got? Exactly. Mushahida. So in many cases the tamabuta will be the clue. Okay, so mushahida, the watching. Right, the watching. Here's an example. Okay. You just have to love this, don't you? Okay. Here's an example. La uhib an alab kurat as-sala. Ufadal mushahadat kurat as-sala. Okay. Want to know what this word mushahada means. So, what are we saying here? I don't like to play basketball. Ufadal, I prefer watching basketball. I prefer watching basketball. Ufadal mushahada kurat as-sala. In this case, okay, that is the verbal noun. Here's another one. This is a great measure 3, one you will probably use a lot. Yusa'id. Yusa'id is to help. Now let's think about this. For example, it doesn't look reciprocal right off the bat, but think about this. What is the root? The root here, sin, ein, dal. What word do we know comes from that root? Right? Sa'id. Sa'id, the basic, is the base, right? Sa'id means what? Happy. So sa'ida, to be happy. Measure 3 is what? Reciprocal. To make each other happy. So help means to make each other happy. What happens when you help someone? Who's happy? Everybody, right? So this is what that means. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, but yusa'id, it means to help. So I want what we would call help, but the Masdar form. So like assistance, helping, help. Notice how in English, right? I mean, how confusing. Helping equals help, which equals the verb, which does not equal the verb help. That's different, right? Which also equals assistance, which looks nothing like this. But in Arabic, this word will be right. Musa'ida. Probably a good word to learn. Musa'ida, assistance. Okay. أحتاج إلى مساعدتك. I need مساعدتك. I need your help. Very good. Okay, so we're going to do one last practice here, and then we're going to turn you loose on the exercises. And by now, these should be like shooting fish in a barrel, which you shouldn't do because it's inhumane. But the exercises, they may be inhumane, but you have to do them anyway. All right, so based on measure 3, the verbs that we know, we want all these things. Take a moment, go right down through the list. You should be able to spit out all of these. Got them? Got them? All right. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the first one. Assistant. Assistant. It's a what kind of word? Is it a doer, a done, a doing? Assistant is, of course, a doer. Okay, one who assists. So we're going to need a active participle. Remember what was the verb? The base verb was that. Okay, so we're going to plug that into the active participle form, and we will get musa'id. Musa'id. Musa'id is an assistant. Musa'id Reis. Musa'id Ustad. Okay, assistant. Right, okay, participation is our next one. Now, what kind of word is participation? Is it a doer, a done, a doing, a to-do? Alright, it's a Masdar, of course, it's a verbal noun, the act of doing something. Now notice how different it looks, right? Assistant, participation, in English, these forms do not help you at all. But in Arabic, this is pretty clear. So this, we're going to need a Masdar for participate. What was the verb to participate? Right, yusharak. So participation will be musharaka. And we just gave you all the other two. Okay, so musharaka. Well, let's go back. Okay, now here we want I helped. Okay, so what do we want here? Obviously, we want a verb. The verb again was sa'ida. We want past tense. So remember, they all conjugate the same. I helped. All right, sa'adtu. And lastly, we want this one. We will watch. Of course, we want here verb, future tense. How do we make future tense? Right, we take the present tense and put a sa in front of it. So here again, what was the stem? The base word was yushahid, to watch. We, nushahid, we watch. We will watch. Sa nushahid. Sa nushahid. Sa nushahid. Right? So now you are ready to do all the exercises for measure 3, and you should steamroll through this. Again, hopefully you got these patterns down, because just like we did with this measure, we're going to just plug in whatever the basic pattern is, and it should all come out automatically. So, on behalf of my good friend Darcy here, who is very happy to see you progressing through measure 3. She's been here waiting at measure 3 to see you all this time. She wants to wish you all the best, and we will see you next time, inshallah. Masalama.